The sound was unmistakable. Clang, the metallic snap of bolt cutters shearing through a security chain shattered the perfect suburban. Silence of a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m., it was a sound that would echo far beyond that quiet street. A sound that marked a $2.3 million mistake and an 8-year federal prison sentence. In 30 seconds, Bethany Kensington Wright transitioned from HOA president to federal felon. Her target was what she deemed an eyesore, a Jeep Wrangler parked in the driveway of a house whose owner was deployed overseas. What she didn't know was that the Jeep belonged to a federal drug task force, its interior loaded with $347,000 worth of classified surveillance equipment. And I was the federal agent who owned it, specializing in the dismantling of criminal organizations. She thought she was confiscating a soldier's truck. In reality, she was committing federal crimes so severe they would make cartel bosses envious. My name is Marcus Tank Rodriguez. 3 months prior, I thought inheriting my grandmother's house in Willowbrook Estates was a blessing. I was wrong. Willowbrook was a picture-perfect suburban hell where every house was an identical shade of beige. Sprinkler systems hissed on automated schedules, and the scent of fresh mulch couldn't conceal the underlying stench of entitlement. The $150 monthly HOA dues were marketed as upholding community standards, but in practice, it meant paying a power-hungry Karen to make your life miserable. As an Army Reserve MP recently accepted into a federal drug task force, Grandma Rose's house was supposed to be my safety net, a place to build equity, rent out during deployments, and honor the woman who raised me after my parents died. That house still carried the smell of her homemade tortillas and the memory of her voice in every creaky floorboard. "Mijo," she'd say, "you stand up to bullies, but you do it the right way." Then there was Bethany Kensington Wright, a 52-year-old real estate agent who drove a white Lexus SUV and measured grass height with an actual ruler. 7 years as HOA president had molded her into a suburban dictator, a status bolstered by her husband Carl's position on the city council, which made her feel untouchable. This was a woman who sent violation notices for Christmas lights left up in January. 2 weeks into my deployment, the email arrived. A violation notice for unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. My government-issued Jeep Wrangler, clearly marked with federal law enforcement decals, was apparently an eyesore. Bethany's interpretation of the HOA covenants prohibited work vehicles in residential driveways. What she didn't know was that the Jeep contained $200,000 worth of surveillance equipment for active cartel investigations, GPS trackers, encrypted radios, covert cameras, all federal property that required departmental authorization to move. The fine was $50 per day, accumulating while I was overseas. My sister Maya, a sweet-natured middle school teacher, tried to reason with this suburban tyrant. She drove over, presented copies of my deployment orders, and even offered to cover the Jeep with a tarp. "Rules are rules," Bethany snapped, looking at Maya as if she were an insect. "If your brother cannot follow simple community standards, maybe this neighborhood isn't right for your family." The phone call from Maya afterward was haunting. I could hear her voice cracking as she sat in our grandmother's kitchen. "Tank," she threatened to put a lien on the house. "She said Carl knows people at the school district and that supporting you could affect my job." Maya began to notice a pattern. The Johnsons, a Marine family, were cited for an excessively loud motorcycle. Sarah Martinez, a Navy wife with a deployed husband, was fined for unprofessional garden gnomes. Every military family in Willowbrook was being targeted. The real kicker came when Maya, digging through our grandmother's old papers, found the original HOA bylaws from 1987. Government vehicles, emergency services, military, law enforcement were specifically exempted. Bethany was fabricating rules, relying on residents being too intimidated or uninformed to check. The neighborhood lived in fear, whispering over fences but too scared to speak publicly. Bethany had cultivated a climate where questioning her authority meant becoming her next target, and Carl's political connections made opposition seem futile. I realized then this wasn't about parking. It was organized harassment of military families by a corrupt HOA board with political protection. The texture of sand between my teeth during that satellite phone call, the smell of diesel and sweat in the 120-degree heat, and the memory of my grandmother's voice. "Stand up to bullies," But do it the right way, crystallized my resolve. While I was overseas keeping drugs off American streets, a suburban princess was trying to steal my family's legacy through fabricated fines and intimidation. Bethany had declared war on the wrong federal agent. Her next move was pure suburban warfare. A registered letter arrived at Maya's mailbox, demanding immediate vehicle removal or emergency towing within 24 hours. The letter, carbon-copied to Carl's city council office and the local police, cited fictional health and safety violations and emergency neighborhood degradation. Maya called me from our grandmother's kitchen, panic in her voice mixing with the familiar creak of the floorboards. "Tank, there's a tow truck circling the block. The driver keeps looking at your Jeep like he's sizing it up." The smell of Grandma's vanilla candles couldn't mask the scent of fear in her voice. This was psychological warfare. My counterpunch was through the Judge Advocate General, JAG Corps. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams took one look at my case, and her professional demeanor shifted to righteous fury. "Rodriguez, this woman just threatened to steal federal law enforcement property. That's not an HOA violation. That's a federal felony." She explained that the Service Members Civil Relief Act specifically prohibits harassment of deployed service members' property. More importantly, my Jeep was federal law enforcement equipment owned by the U.S. government. Williams filed a formal complaint, triggering a federal military liaison review. Bethany's power trip was now on the radar of people with real authority. Meanwhile, Maya kept digging. In a stack of old HOA minutes from 2019, she found a smoking gun, a letter from Bethany to the City Planning Commission, arguing against military housing. Assistance programs in Willowbrook because transient military. Populations don't maintain long-term community. Investment standards. She had been systematically trying to keep military families out for years. The texture of aged paper crumbling between Maya's fingers as she photographed the evidence. The sound of her sharp intake of breath. "Tank. She's been systematically targeting every military family that moves here." This wasn't random tyranny. It was organized discrimination with political backing. Carl had a pending luxury condo development deal that required HOA approval for zoning variances. Military families with their unsightly work vehicles and unpredictable deployment schedules hurt his exclusive community marketing angle. Maya's teacher instincts kicked in. She began building a network of targeted families, documenting every fabricated violation and threat, accidentally constructing a federal discrimination case. Bethany escalated. The sound of her expensive heels clicking on our driveway concrete echoed through Maya's phone as she conducted her own property inspection, photographing my Jeep from multiple angles. "Your brother's military service doesn't excuse community non-compliance," she told Maya. "Perhaps your family should consider whether this neighborhood is appropriate for your lifestyle. Code for we don't want your kind here." My response was to remotely activate the Jeep's security systems. The data was damning. Bethany had trespassed on my property 17 times in 3 days, photographing federal law enforcement equipment without authorization. When my task force supervisor, Captain Sarah Chen, heard that a suburban HOA president was surveilling federal drug enforcement equipment, her response was succinct. "Rodriguez, how fast do you want me to make this woman's life complicated?" 3 days after my JAG complaint, Bethany hired exec safe security to patrol the neighborhood. 2 guards in a white SUV documented my Jeep every hour. But the real damage was what they were telling the neighbors. Maya called me in tears. "Tank, they're saying you're dangerous. That military vehicles create security risks." Our neighbors were now avoiding her. The sound of her sobs mixing with the desert wind over the phone made something cold and hard settle in my chest. They were destroying my family's reputation while I was powerless to defend them. Captain Chen advised caution. Coming in too heavy would validate their claims. The twist came from my Jeep's security footage. At 1:43 a.m., it showed Bethany using a flashlight to examine the Jeep's interior, photographing dashboard equipment and trying the door handles. She was attempting to access classified equipment, and she wasn't alone. Security guards were taking detailed photos of federal communications gear. The community dynamics crumbled further. Parents at Maya's school questioned if a military family with security issues should be teaching children. Her principal called her in for a conversation about community concerns. The smell of chalk dust and fear filled her voice during our calls. "Tank, they're destroying my career." The security guards cornered Maya at the grocery store. "Ma'am, we need to discuss your brother's military activities," the lead guard said, blocking her path. "That vehicle contains equipment that could pose risks to communion." When federal marshals arrived and found the community gate locked, preventing access to stolen federal property, Marshal Jennifer Torres's expression turned predatory. "Ma'am, you've obstructed federal agents. Open this gate immediately or face additional charges." Bethany's response sealed her fate. "I don't recognize federal authority over private HOA property. You people have no jurisdiction in my community." She had just declared war on the U.S. government in her bathrobe. I returned stateside 72 hours later. The smell in Grandma's house was different. Not vanilla or tortillas, but the scent of fear and desperation that had seeped into the walls. "Tank, you need to see this before the feds get here," Maya said, her hands trembling as she spread documents across the dining table. She had acquired 5 years of HOA financial records through her teacher network. Buried within was a contract between Kensington Urban Holdings and Eastbrook Development Corporation dated 6 months before I inherited the house. The subject, Willowbrook Estates Acquisition Strategy Phase 2 Implementation. "They weren't just harassing military families randomly," Maya whispered. "They were systematically clearing properties for a massive development deal." The contract showed Carl's company had pre-sold 47 properties, including Grandma's, to a national developer for luxury condos, properties they didn't even own yet. The target list included every military family and elderly resident who couldn't fight back. Bethany had been forging violation notices. The original 1987 bylaws specifically protected military and law enforcement vehicles. She created fake rules, counting on fear and ignorance. The HOA financial records revealed systematic embezzlement. Over 3 years, $184,000 in community funds had been diverted to Carl's development company through fake consulting contracts and non-existent improvement projects. This was federal mail fraud and racketeering. Then Maya revealed the most painful part. "Tank, I think they killed her." She showed me violation notices sent to Grandma during her final weeks in hospice. Citations for property maintenance failures and threats of legal action against a dying woman. The hospice nurse said her blood pressure spiked with each letter. She kept asking if we'd lose the house. Her final words, "Mijo, don't let them take our home," which I had thought were delirium, were a warning. Maya was no longer a victim. She was a warrior. A war room formed in Grandma's living room. Captain Chen arrived with federal prosecutors. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez was amazed. "Rodriguez, I've prosecuted cartel money laundering with less documentation." She explained that the pattern of criminal enterprise, embezzlement, fraud, civil rights violations, coordinated between Carl's counsel position and Bethany's HOA authority, and involving interstate commerce, made it a federal RICO case. Our allies gathered, Tom Henderson's veteran network, Mrs. Patterson with her surveillance photos, Maya's teacher union with media expertise. The sound of Maya's confident voice coordinating operations filled the room where Grandma once hummed lullabies. Maya's financial investigation revealed the depth of the scheme. Forensic accountant Jennifer Walsh explained how Carl sold houses to out-of-state developers before forcing current owners to sell. Emails discussed displacement timelines for properties they didn't own. The violation was visceral. They had planned to steal Grandma's house before she died. We set up a DIY surveillance network. Mrs. Patterson's window became command central. Tom's garage housed equipment. Maya then launched a recall election. Using her civics knowledge, she collected signatures from 67% of residents demanding board removal. The media strategy went viral, generating congressional attention. We discovered insurance fraud. Bethany had filed claims for property damage from my Jeep that never existed. Civil rights attorneys joined after reviewing the discrimination patterns. Bethany's desperation turned criminal. At 3:17 a.m., Maya's infrared cameras caught her in our backyard, burning HOA financial records in a trash can. The acrid smell of burning paper and lighter fluid drifted through the window. "Tank! She's destroying evidence in our yard." Federal surveillance teams documented it all. Then Maya's car was vandalized, tires slashed, military scum spray-painted on the windshield. The sound of crunching glass under her feet made something cold settle in me. Captain Chen arranged a federal protective detail for Maya and other witnesses. Tom Henderson organized veteran patrols. The sound of combat boots on pavement at 2 a.m. became the new neighborhood soundtrack. Carl's corruption went deeper. Maya found city council recordings where he pressured the police chief to ignore military family complaints. "These military people bring instability," his voice dripped with entitlement. "Their vehicles, their schedules, their problems affect property values." That recording became evidence for federal conspiracy charges. Bethany tried to bribe Maya with $50,000 in cash outside a grocery store. "Take this money. Find somewhere more suitable for your lifestyle." Maya recorded it. Attempted witness bribery carries a 5-year minimum. She even tried to bribe federal agents through a private investigator using embezzled HOA funds. Carl's political allies fled. The mayor distanced himself. Council members demanded his resignation. The final confrontation happened at the Willowbrook Estates Community Center, packed beyond capacity with federal agents, news cameras, and military families from 3 states. Congressional representatives sat in the front row. Bethany arrived late to a gauntlet of protesters. The sound of her heels was drowned out by chants of "Thank you for your service," directed at Maya. She entered like a deposed dictator. Carl shuffled behind her, broken. Maya took the podium, now a powerful advocate. "For 5 years, these people used their positions to wage war against military families," she began, her voice amplified across social media. The crowd erupted. Federal Prosecutor Martinez stepped forward. "The United States government has compiled overwhelming evidence of criminal conspiracy." Each charge was a sledgehammer. Tom Henderson spoke, his voice trembling. "My son served 3 tours. These people thought they could spit on that sacrifice. Then it was my turn." I felt Grandma's presence. "Bethany Kensington Wright thought she was cutting locks on some soldier's personal vehicle," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "What she actually did was interfere with an active federal drug operation, compromise classified surveillance equipment, and steal property belonging to the United States government." A collective gasp filled the room. That Jeep contained $347,000 in equipment and evidence from cartel investigations. She compromised national security. Bethany's face turned to concrete. But her real crime was waging systematic warfare against military families, using government corruption to steal from her community, and believing suburban entitlement trumped federal law. The crowd gave a standing ovation. Marshal Torres approached with handcuffs. "Bethany Kensington Wright, you're under arrest for theft of federal law enforcement property, conspiracy to violate civil rights, embezzlement, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice." The sound of the cuffs clicking shut was broadcast live. Carl tried to flee out the back and ran straight into federal agents. 18 months later, I stood in Grandma's kitchen reading the sentencing report. Bethany received 8 years in federal prison with no parole, plus $647,000 in restitution. The judge stated, "Your systematic harassment of military families represents domestic terrorism disguised as community governance." Carl got 6 years and a lifetime ban from public office. His empire collapsed with $3.2 million in settlements. Our neighborhood transformed. Maya was elected HOA president and implemented the Willowbrook Military Family Bill of Rights, a national model. The Veteran Memorial Park now sits where Bethany's house once stood, seized through asset forfeiture. Children play where tyranny lived. The Rodriguez Foundation for Military Family Rights became Maya's life's work. Her documentation methods are taught at FBI academies. Grandma's house is now mission control for military family advocacy. The Tank Rodriguez Act provides federal oversight of community governance. Property values in Willowbrook increased by 31% after the corruption was purged. Military families now seek out our community. Maya married a Navy veteran. I found happiness with Elena Martinez, a federal prosecutor on our case. We bought the house next to Grandma's. the Rodriguez Military Scholarship Fund, created from lawsuit settlements, has sent 23 military children to college. Mrs. Patterson, now 91, still cuts the ribbon at every community event. Your grandmother knew you'd do something special, she tells me. She just didn't know you'd save the whole neighborhood. The best moment is every morning, seeing the American flag flying over houses where military families live without fear. This is what victory tastes like. Justice served, community healed, and the knowledge that bullies can be defeated when good people organize and fight back.